Tēnā koutou. Ko te wehi kia i hoa te timatanga o te whakaaro nui, kei te wehi ki tōne ingoatapu. Kia tau iho ana manaakitanga ki runga ki te kuini Māori. Te riki nui, ngā waihono i te pō. Tana whare ka whiariki. Heo tira te ariki o te kaupapa e huia nei tēnei whare, e takahia nei te nuku o te whenua, heo tira te papanekenekahanga o ngā mātua o ngā tūpuna. Tēnā koutou, haere mai. Kia tau iho ko aua manaakitanga. Kia rire, hau, pai mārire, te āhua o tā koutou haere mai. Te āhua o tā koutou haere mai ki te whakarongo, ki te mātakitaki. Heo tira ki te tautoko, ki te manaaki, ia moana, te ahorangi. Ai, me whakanui a te ahorangi. Tēnā, noho mai. Kia tau te rangi Māori ki runga ki o koutou, tātou katoa, te roanga o tēnei pōwahi ahi. Tēnā koutou, whiri noa, tēnā hui tātou katoa. Ahorangi, tangi wairiwi.
A tēnā koutou katoa kua karapene mai i raro i te whare. I tēnei wā, mihi ana ki tō tātou matua nāna tātou i whakarite i whakatau. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. The Professorial lecture series showcases the university's newest professors and celebrates their academic achievements and journey to date. We encourage University of Waikato staff, whānau and colleagues of the presenting professor to attend and celebrate their appointment along with the public. Me whakahihi tātou katika. E hara tēnei pakuhari koa mo te takitahi, engari ma te takitini ke. Within Māoridom, our achievements are not the individuals, but that to be celebrated by and for the collective. I tēnei pō, kei konei tātou ki te whakanui i te ekenga ki ngā pai o angitu i tēnei ao mātauranga o tākuta Waikaremoana Waitoki. So this evening, we gather to celebrate the academic journey of one of our recent professor appointments, Dr. Waikaremoana Waitoki, zo Ngāti Hako and Ngāti Mahanga descent, and is here in Te Pua Wānanga ki te ao, the Faculty of Māori and Indigenous Studies. Moana began her career after completing her clinical psychological training in 2000 and then returned to the university to teach in the clinical psychological program, following Dr. Avril Herbert. She completed her PhD in 2012 under the supervision of Dr. Neville Robertson and the late Emeritus Professor Jane Ritchie. Ai, ka maumahara tātou ki aia katika. Moana served on the New Zealand Psychologist Board until 2009 and was the Bicultural Director of the New Zealand Psychological Society until 2016. From 2000 to 2022, she was the President of the Society, a period that coincided with the COVID-19 lockdown. She is now a Fellow and was recently the first Māori psychologist to receive the Sir Thomas Hunter Award for Excellence in Psychology. In 2022, she was awarded the Te Pua Waitanga Research Excellence Award by the Royal Society Te Apārangi for her distinctive contribution to te ao Māori. Me paki tātou. Engari, he kōrero tonu. She has led Marsden-funded research on how mātauranga Māori and Indigenous psychology can reshape the discipline and a multidisciplinary study of Waikato wetland pā. She is also involved in Health Research Council grants on hapu ora, wairua, spirituality, and physical activity and mental health. She co-leads the MB-funded whea, working to end racial oppression project. Now, alongside her academic and professional roles, kāre koutou I mōhio, Moana is the third dan in Kyokushin karate. Ai, kia tūpato mai. Engari, ka whakaako tonu I e tērā mahi mā te reo Māori. Her dream project is to research Indigenous martial arts as resistance, giving her an excuse to train rather than write. Hoi no, nō ki te honore, he rāhiri tēnei kia ahurangi, Waikaremoana Waitoki, haramai. I tēnei pō, ko tana kauwhau tuatahi hei ahorangi. Ko tana kaupapa, kei whea te ūkaipō. Nau mai.
Tēnā rawātu, tēnā koutou, tēnā kōrua, hika kānau ki te tū, ki raro I ngā parirau o ku rangatira no te tari Māori. Kia ora everybody, I will just kick on because I really feel like that after that long introduction I should just say, okay, thank you, we're done. And yeah, so thank you for coming. Thank you to my whānau. If your children get noisy, I don't mind. It's actually okay if your children, not maybe not too noisy, but you know, if your children get noisy, it's absolutely fine. Ko tēnei kōrero, kei whea te ūkaipō. Where is the, okay, we're going this way, where is the source of knowledge? And I thought about this question, so each time you are asked to provide an abstract and a title, and I was originally thinking of something nice like a whakatauki, and then I thought, well actually this is something that's been part of my journey, which is to look for the ūkaipō. So where is the source of knowledge? E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā kārangatanga maha o te motu, tēnā koutou katoa. He mihi tēnei kia koutou kua tai mai, ki te whakarongo, ki te wānanga, ki te tautoko, I tēnei haerenga āku, tēnei au he uri no Ngāti Hako, no Ngāti Mahanga, e tuake nei, I raro I te maru, o ku mātua tūpuna, hei kawe I ngā kōrero o te ūkaipō. Kei whea te ūkaipō. This question has followed me throughout my academic life, sometimes as a whisper, sometimes as a challenge. It asks not only where knowledge lives, but who it serves, who it uplifts, and who it remembers. And just initially I would like to he whakapuaki he mamai aroha, and these have been the source of my ūkaipō for a number of years now. Past Professor Angus McFarlane, many of you will know who he is, an absolute source of knowledge, inspiration and support for many of us in this room. And Hiniwirangi Kohu Morgan, activist, artist, survivor, queer and advisor. Very much the person to tell you where the ūkaipō is, very much the person to boss around an entire room full of people and tell them to get outside and tidy up your shoes. Associate Professor Damien Scarf, Otago University, scholar, activist and one of our wero OGs. A journey across fields. When I think about the paths we take towards knowledge, I am reminded of my earliest walks across the field from Knighton Road to the university swimming pool. It was painful as the field was covered in prickles. I saw the goal of getting to the pool on a hot summer day, me and my family. My brothers, impervious to pain it seems, ran across the grass. I struggled with a towel under my feet to get across. When I arrived, my feet were covered in broken prickles. On reflection, that walk has not changed. I did not realise, but this has been that is a metaphor, and that is something that has resonated with me as I wrote this. When I entered university as an adult with 2 young children, I drove in a broken, unregistered car from Huntly. I stole in every day. For the first year, hoping not to get caught. I studied psychology and te reo Māori. I walked the same corridors as my father, looked for his cubbyhole office where he wrote his master's thesis, and Emeritus Professor Jane Ritchie was also his supervisor. When I asked my lecturer, Dr. Mike Hills, to sign a form, he asked me, "Is Richard your father?" And I mumbled yes. My mother studied with Professor Timothy Karetu and John Rangihau. She brought te reo Māori back to our home. She went to A Block, where I am now, in the Faculty of Māori and Indigenous Studies. So I grew up here. The university motto asks, "Hutia te rito o te harakeke, kei whea te kōmako e kō." If you remove the heart of the harakeke, where will the bellbird sing? It's a reminder that knowledge, like the harakeke, depends on its heart, its ūkaipō. Without it, the song is lost. And mātauranga Māori as living knowledge. That walk across the field, prickles, pain, persistence, was only one journey. The walls of this university hold many of our stories. For some, it is a site of exclusion and struggles. For others, a place of return. Over time, I've come to see that kei whea te ūkaipō, where is the source of our knowledge, is not just a question about where we learn, but how and why we learn and what is hidden from us. It also asks us to think about the nature of knowledge itself. Who defines it, who holds it, and who decides what counts as truth. Mātauranga is not just information, it is a relationship between people, whenua, wairua, and the unseen dimensions that connect us to our tūpuna. It lives in kōrero shared around the table, in karakia uttered before dawn, in the quiet observations of the tides or the seasons. It does not neatly sit in journals or archives alone, but breathes through our daily practices. When I entered the university, I didn't bring that mātauranga with me. I learned that sometimes the very institutions that claim to value knowledge can be the hardest places to locate its true heart. Te ūkaipō te taiao. If kei whea te ūkaipō asks where knowledge resides, then the ūkaipō te taiao reminds us of where it is born and sustained. The title of this address draws from the wisdom of Dr. Aroha Yates, who connects ūkaipō to Papa Tuanuku, our Earth Mother, and to all our grandmothers reaching back through te kore and te pō, to that time of pure potential. It is a reminder that knowledge like itself begins in darkness, in potential, in the unseen spaces that nurture growth. Te taiao is the environment, the living universe of knowledge around us and within us. Together, ūkaipō and taiao remind us that knowledge is not only intellectual, it is embodied, it is spiritual, it is intergenerational. When I think of ūkaipō, I think of those who have sustained me in my own learning journey, those who have nourished my wairua along the way. I think of Dr. Avril Herbert, the first Māori clinical psychologist to hold a PhD, Dr. Jane Ritchie, who became my supervisor. Her advice, just get it done. Code, of course, for write the PhD. And Dr. Neville Robertson, who achieved something close to cult status in Australia for calling out racism in psychology. When Avril left psychology, I stepped into her role. Before I had the language to describe what I was doing, I began to unpack the psychology I had been taught. I reflected on what would connect students to a Māori worldview. There was no mention of mātauranga Māori in those days. It was called a Māori worldview, not decolonising psychology, not land back, not settler colonialism or unearned privilege. The inaugural Māori and Psychology Symposium, led by Professor Linda Waikaremoana became a beacon for Māori psychologists seeking to make space for mātauranga Māori within the academy. Knowledge cannot exist in isolation. It needs voices, hands and hearts. Distinguished Professor Linda Tuhiwai-Smith emphasised how important it is for whānau to see themselves at university as students, as teachers, as sites of potential. Returning to the ūkaipō is not a solitary journey. It requires relationships, whakapapa and collective effort. In that spirit, I draw on 3 research projects that speak to the interconnectedness of mātauranga Māori as the source of our ūkaipō. These projects contribute to a deeper understanding of Māori, our life essence, wairua, and mātauranga Māori, and of how we respond to racism. So this slide is the inaugural National Māori Graduates of Psychology Symposium, actually held right here. So this is my second time speaking on this floor. And we had Professor Dan Zerker open the symposium, and some of us here were there then. And then in 2007, we had our second symposium, Claiming Spaces, Māori and Pacific Psychology Symposium. We had another one in 2012, and we've continued to grow and continued to develop a space in psychology that provides that source of that ūkaipō that I believe we need when we come through academia. Our research can be an act of remembering, of returning to the ūkaipō. Each project I've been a part of has tried in its own way to ask, how do we nourish and protect our source of knowledge in a world that too often extracts, consumes, and forgets? And I'm kind of hoping Andre's here by now, but I know his family's here. This project, The Embrace of Our Ancestors, Reimagining and Indigenous Psychology. And so Andre sent me a text and asked if he could do interpretive dance in the back, and would it be inappropriate? And I said, well, no, it won't. Please do. And so I thought I'd bring him here. I know he's on his way from work. This slide here is him and I. We're coming back from Whakatane, and we're stuck in a queue of traffic. The traffic had actually blocked up from Tauranga all the way to the bottom of the Bombays, and so we played. We had just come back, and a number of my colleagues are here as well. We had just come back from a week of working with the community in Ngāti Awa immediately following the Whakaari eruption. And so we went there every day, and this is the day before Christmas. One of the projects that has deepened my own understanding of the ūkaipō is The Embrace of Our Ancestors, Reimagining and Indigenous Psychology. This research sought to reclaim and revitalise mātauranga Māori as a foundation for an Indigenous psychology, one that transforms dominant paradigms and advances Māori self-determination. The ūkaipō took many forms in this project: a marae kitchen filled with laughter and karanga, an archive room with the scent of paper and dust stirred ancestral memory, the quiet of the bush where karakia reconnected us to te taiao. In exchange, we held wānanga and shared knowledge developed specifically for Māori. The concept of reciprocity was central. We set out to explore Māori knowledge of healing and found it abundantly. From these insights, we created resources grounded in key principles of healing from a Māori perspective, freely available online now, and through training programs run in collaboration with Te Rauora. These taonga were not theoretical. They were mobilised in times of crisis, during COVID-19, the Whakaari eruption and the Ihu Mātau occupation, where healing needed to be immediate, grounded and real. This research affirmed that mātauranga Māori is a living source, a pulse that continues to sustain us. It is the ūkaipō from which an Indigenous psychology grows, a psychology that restores balance, strengthens Māori, and draws us back to knowledge sovereignty. That's my grandchild. So it's like, kia ora lala. Yes. And I'm thinking about how I'm going to write this talk and how I'm going to centre what I think is important. And this particular diagram, many of you will have seen this before. So this diagram is where we've worked to position Māori, our living essence, our life principle, in relationship to our language, in relationship to our creative arts, in relationship to our spirituality and wairua, in relationship to our genealogy, our whakapapa, our family, our environment, and activism. The protection of all these things. And so as I've conducted my work over the years, I come back to this. I came to this and I go back to this. To be well, to flourish, is to be in relationship with these things. And we held wānanga, we worked with our communities, and we offered space, we offered time, and we offered our understandings and our knowledge. This particular set of slides here is a series of kōrero that we had during COVID. We also developed, when I say we, I'm saying me and my mates, me and my friends, me and people on research projects, pretty much me and anyone I could rustle up. You just put your hands up because I know half of you here have been in that rustle. And this is about weaving the knowledge that I know others hold. And I know in our communities we hold a vast amount of knowledge, and sometimes we just need to connect that knowledge. And so during COVID, that knowledge was disconnected as far as the ministries were concerned. But I knew that our communities had that knowledge, and so we all worked together and held these wānanga. We were online, and then once the lockdown ended, we went into community to share our ūkaipō. And some of our resources have been shared internationally, and they centre the idea of how to be well within our mātauranga Māori, within our origin stories, and within our potential to imagine a new world. And so we played with our gods. One of our gods looks a little bit like he rides a motorbike. But we played with our gods. Because we are mokopuna, we can play. It's an expectation in a bit of a way where, because we are mokopuna of gods, we can play up, knowing that our gods will redirect us and show us where we should be going, but doing that with love. Possibly one of the most famous, the Wairua project. And I want to shout out to the Wairua team, and I also want to shout out to Rachel for doing her professorial a month or so ago, and she's here. And so it's just a shout out to our team and a shout out to Rachel as well. So our Wairua project, the second strand of my journey to the ūkaipō was the Wairua. Working to End Racial Oppression project. Wairua is a research program that confronted racism across housing, employment, institutions and intergroup relations. And as it turned out, Wairua started at about the time, it actually started in the year of COVID. I have so many photos of team meetings, screenshots of us in team meetings. This is some of our team. So the ūkaipō took, no, wrong one. With 17 projects, over 20 researchers, 14 summer interns, 9 PhDs, we're all centred Māori voices, they centred migrant voices, they centred the voices of those who are most often left in the margins. We influenced national conversations, policies and community engagement. We activated, we turned up. Through whea, we nurtured the next generation of scholars, providing mentorship and wānanga that equipped them to confront racism, patriarchy, settler colonialism, epistemic injustice, and systemic oppression. The structures behind housing and food insecurity, poor health, economic inequities, state violence, the prison and military industrial complexes, and inequities at the border. The revolution will not be funded. The revolution will not be funded unless we defund harm and invest in schools, hospitals, housing, communities. This, as I say, is 17 projects. And a little bit like choosing my player of the day, the project I worked on with our amazing team is an extension of the work in psychology that I have dedicated considerable energy to. Called Kia Whakapapa Pounamu Te Moana, we drew on the journey that Kingi Tawhiao made to England to protest the actions of the colonial settlers. We strived to account for racism in psychology, and while we found it, we also found allies. And this is one of our team for that one project. And there's Damien in the corner, and many are, actually a couple are still here. Whea is a reminder that knowledge, justice and community must grow together with courage. While we worked, racism did too. Like prickles invisible on the landscape, but there nonetheless. And this amazingly beautiful picture was done by Isabel Te Aho White, who is a renowned, talented artist, and much of her work can be found in bookshops actually, and in Te Papa. And what we wanted to achieve with this particular picture was to Kia Whakapapa Pounamu Te Moana refers to may the waters be as smooth as Pounamu, as smooth as greenstone. And that was said as a tongi to Kingi Tawhiao when he went on his journey back to his journey to England, and they wanted him to return. And in this image, we played with the idea of kia whakapapa Pounamu. So may the Pounamu be smooth. And in this, we've asked Isabel to capture the depths and the murkiness of the landscape in which we navigate, but also the beauty, the potential, and the sites of survivance and the sites of survival. And just at the top, there are our niho taniwha, and I've used those to depict just that kind of gnawing, a little bit like the prickles. And then in our work in psychology, and I apologise that I'm choosing my favourite child again, we wanted to talk the story in pictures. We've done a lot of writing, but we know that not all our communities have access to words, and they don't have access to the words that we use, but they understand pictures. Which is not to say that they can't understand words. What that means is we have to adjust our words. And so this image here is part of one of our projects in the Whakapapa Pounamu that asked what are some of the issues that our students, our lecturers, our psychologists, our colleagues face. And this is something we depicted, which was to say they seem to be always deflecting and defending and warding off questions that asked about their right to exist. What is mātauranga Māori? Having to explain, having to do the cultural labour, having to be the cultural advisor. And then when asked to change and asked how the system can be changed, we don't have enough Māori staff. And on this one, can you be on my panel? Amid those prickles, we faced the neoliberal coalition government dismantling decades of work. As we built, racism crushed. Like many of our colleagues, we were criticised for naming racism, genocide, white supremacy, both across Aotearoa and internationally. We wrote so many submissions, it felt like a full-time job. In naming racism as a system of power, not only did COVID start when we started, the uni went through a very public, very open allegation of racism, and we've been working with our senior staff, senior management, to navigate and find ways to work through the task force report. And so to know that our ūkaipō exists, we must name what we are up against. It is the foundation of settler colonialism and the foundation of our academic institutions. The Wairua project began when the University of Waikato was publicly called out for structural racism. Te tiriti o Waitangi, the bond with Waikato Tainui, is the source of addressing racism. The ūkaipō is the source of safety and also of hope. When we call out racism, when we call out a problem, we become the problem. So the ūkaipō is the source of safety and also of hope. This slide is where I note that we actually spent quite a bit of time writing submissions, sitting at tables, turning up to Parliament with a flag. And here I want to talk about the site of safety, he paiaka tōtara. He paiaka tōtara is a rōpū of Māori psychologists, students, was created as an ūkaipō to provide a space for Māori to connect, to grow, and to thrive. And it's been an amazing journey because, of course, in the years gone by, we have drawn on the members of He Paiaka Tōtara to come with us to Ihu Mātau, to come with us to Christchurch after the mosque attack, to come with us to Whakaari, and to come with us to Parliament. We are connected to international Indigenous psychologists to share knowledge. We are at a point of no return. In that, same as I'm halfway through the field of prickles, if I go back, I'll still collect prickles. If I go forward, I'll still collect prickles. But at least I'll get in the water. So we are at a point of no return. We can develop independent of mainstream institutions. Tūriki, tūriki, paneke, paneke. We also recognise the many types of knowledge and welcome different psychologies. The Asian Psychology Collective, the Muslim Psychology Collective, and Pacificology. We are preparing our colleagues and our students for the world as our ancestors intended. To centre mātauranga Māori is to honour these relationships. And our work in the last 2 years has been to develop a decolonial pedagogy and to educate our rōpū, educate our psychologists about the absolute true intention of te tiriti, the role of settler colonialism, and how we can be tiriti educators. And so when I said at the beginning that when I came here I did not come armed with mātauranga, I learnt it when I got here. And then a good friend and colleague, okay, it's Donna Campbell, said that something I had said to her in another presentation was about unlearning. And so as I was finishing my PhD, and Neville knows this, as I was finishing my PhD, I realised that I actually needed to rewrite the end. And it was at that point where I had to examine the stories and the kōrero that I had been gifted from Māori about how they practiced as Māori, that I saw what needed to be undone. And I had gone into my PhD journey believing that I was armed with the tools that I needed. But as we know, you cannot dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. And what I learned from my communities was that the Indigenous knowledge is taught outside of. And so I came back to my PhD and said, okay, I'm going to say that. And then I left the parts that I knew were actually just too much for me to examine, because I didn't know. I'm listening to these incredible, amazing, deep, rich mātauranga Māori kōrero, and I didn't understand. I understood it, but I didn't deeply understand. And so what I have been doing for that since then is to work to decolonise the psychology so that the growing number of psychology students and Māori coming through know where they can be situated. And what the Wero project taught me, and what being here with the team in Wero, is that we do absolutely need to step outside. For those of us who stay, because our families will still come through, our mokopuna will still come through, the decolonial pedagogy will give us the tools to provide an alternative. And when I said at the beginning that I've only ever known the Waikato, I've only ever known the University of Waikato, I'm okay with that. I don't feel the need to have another university qualification after my name. And I am blessed to be able to see the children of my friends come through. I'm blessed to be able to see my cousins, people who know me from way back when I stole in on a broken car. And I'm happy to be here to help those who want to be here. And so mātauranga Māori as ancestral intelligence. Mātauranga Māori as ancestral intelligence is deeply authentic. It lives in the breath of our karakia, the rhythm of our waiata, the stories whispered on marae ātea, and the quiet knowing passed between generations. So it is there for us to capture. It is there for us to walk by, listen to, pick up when we are ready. And I have felt this intelligence in the wairua of students who ask, where do I belong in this place? I have felt it in wānanga where tears and laughter flow freely, where healing is not a theory, but a practice. I have other research. It is, again, a bit like choosing your player of the day. And our current work is a commitment to reimagining the healthcare system This is a shout out to Hukarere. Reimagining the healthcare system through the lens of wairua, hauora and Māori. It is not simply a research project. It is a return to the ūkaipō, the source of nourishment, identity and healing. In my space, I am guided by the wisdom of Dr. Hukarere Valentine. Like, how many times can I shout out to her? Who reminds us, we may ask what wairua is, but actually we might be better asking what wairua isn't. Wairua is related to everything that was, is, and will be Māori. In the same way, we may ask what ūkaipō is, and like wairua, it is in everything that we need. So in closing, so we have to go back to our ūkaipō, I ask you to reflect on the question, kei whea tō ūkaipō? Where is your ūkaipō? And I offer my aroha to those who have walked beside me or guided me throughout my journey. And at the beginning of COVID, Linda Waimarie Nikora asked all her Māori colleagues on Ngā Pai o te Māramatanga email list, so hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of us, to do a little clip right at the beginning, just before March 23, to do a little clip telling everybody to stay home and wash their hands. And I thought, well, we're pretty anxious. We're pretty worried. And so I did a little clip where I read Hone Tūwhare's poem. And so I'm going to read it to close. And I want you to take a moment to reflect as I read through Hone's poem, which is an incredibly powerful, centering poem. Rain. I can hear you making small holes in the silence, rain. If I were deaf, the pores of my skin would open to you and shut. And I should know you by the lick of you if I were blind. The something special smell of you when the sun cakes the ground. The steady drum roll sound you make when the wind drops. But if I should not hear, smell or feel or see you, you would still define me, disperse me, wash over me, rain. And as I say, I offer my aroha and thanks to those who have walked beside me or guided me throughout my journey. And will this play? Toi tū te tiriti.
Paki mai e whana. Well, pe pēhea te whakakapi e ētahi o ngā whakaaro ka puta i au Waikaremoana, ahurangi Waikaremoana. Waitoki. Okay, just to try and pull some threads of her kōrero. I think she talked about kei hea te ūkaipō. So something that impresses upon my mind in the first strand was the importance of remembrance and legacy, and the prickles that stayed and didn't go away. But, you know, that knowledge depends on its heart. I kōrero ia mo te hutia, taua kōrero hutia te rito. So what imprints on my mind, mātauranga Māori, is that living knowledge, the relationships between people and whenua that connect to our tūpuna. E kōrero ana ia mo te ūkaipō me te taiao. Hoki atu ana ki a papatua nuku. Tētahi atu whakaaro I puta ake, te taha wairua, intergenerational and nourishing. Ko hoki anō ki tēnei kaupapa o te mātauranga Māori worldview, te mātauranga Māori. And the importance of knowledge. Knowledge needs its voices, its hands and its hearts. Kia hau ko tana mero tuatahi. She talked to us about the importance in that early part of those projects, those psychology projects, Māori, the making the difference, the claiming those spaces and the sources of ūkaipō. Katoa ana kōrero, e kōrero ana kia hau, ko te kaupapa matua, hoki ana, act of remembrance. Wera kōrero katoa e tūwhera ana ki taua wā. Taua kaupapa hira hira, kai hia te mātauranga Māori I roto I rā wāhi, I rā akoranga, and creating a space for mātauranga Māori. The thing that really struck me was ko taua pikitia, and I called it tamanui te rā, and it had 6 different hihi, whatever you may have called it, but that's what it stuck into my mind as being tamanui te rā. Ana ka whiti mai, ana hihi katoa, and that's how I remember it. So there were 6 different parts of it, but to me, what stuck with me was that mātauranga Māori, the exchange being a living source, a pulse, but creating knowledge sovereignty. And she came back to that later by talking about mātauranga Māori being as ancestral intelligence. But I just want to flick quickly to that second strand where she talked about the Whittle project, and I've only been here for nearly 2 years, and that Whittle project has been such has had such an impact and an overwhelming presence within te pua wānanga ki te ao, working to end racial oppressions. And I mean, tēnei wahine, he marae kura, he roto I a mātou, 2 words, selfless and forever giving. Ki ngā tangata katoa, aha ko wai, aha ko no whea. So, you know, listening to her talk about the endless projects, 17 projects, and I see a lot of people in the room here connected to Whittle. But for me, ka hoki anō ki tana kaupapa matua te pō, te ūkaipō, ka he te ūkaipō. Things that have struck an accord. Te ūkaipō is not only sources of knowledge, but also sources to address ngā take ka ara ake. Address how to deal with kaupapa, address how to deal with anxieties, difficulties. In this context, it was around racism, but not only to address these, but also to offer places of safety. Not only here for us within the project of Whittle itself, but nationally and internationally. And as she talks about those prickles again, te tai te haere whakamua, ka tai te haere whakamua, engari te tai te hoki whakamuri. So she's at that point of no return with all the different relationships, projects and networks that she's created along the way. Nā reira, hei whakakapi ake.
Maia.
Mihi ana ki aia, mihi ana ki ana torohanga ko hoki anō ki tērā pikitia, kia hau ko tamanui te rā, e ono mana hihinga matua o taua pikitia, mātauranga Māori as ancestral intelligence. E ki ana ia authentic, Ka kite ake ka rongo ake i runga i ngā karakia, i roto i ngā waiata, mai i ngā tūpuna, ko ngā āhuatanga heki iho ki ngā papa tupuranga o Nāia nei. Kei reira, mihe mea ka āta whakarongo tātou, ka noho ki te whakarongo atu mā tātou e tiki atu i ngā wā ka hiehia ki a tiki atu. And what does the last point? It's healing is not a theory, but a practice. Nā reira, kei konei tātou, e tūohu ana ki a koe, e tuku whakamānawa ki a koe i runga no i te atāhua, te kaunga hoki ngā kōrero, kua puta hei kauwhau, tuatahi mau, hei ahorangi. Nā reira, tātou mā, paki mai.
And a woohoo, and a woohoo, and a woo-ha. Kia ora tātou. Inspired by this, I offer a karakia that I just made up. He whenei nei te whakaaro o te kupu whakakapi. Guaho, kua tū, kua matara. Kia u, kia mau, kia ita, ki te kaingia o te mōhiotanga, te whainga o te mātauranga, te tukunga o waua māramatanga katoa ki te ao. Kia tūturu o whiti, whakamaua kia tīna.
Tīna.
Ui e.
Tāiki e.